Thanks. I think I'm going to stand at the podium for part of this. So I'm really, really excited, and I thank everybody for sticking around, and you were very wise to do so, because this is actually the best panel of the entire conference. We've got it's a perfect topic, reinventing Miami. So, we have, luckily, some of our most forward-thinking elected leaders with us today. Mayor Francis Suarez of the city of Miami, Miami-Dade County Commissioner Danielle Higgins, and then two international thought leaders in the area of mobility, Rebecca Gutierrez from Blink Charging, and Carlo Ratti, who is from the Sensible City Lab at MIT. And lest you think that's some kind of oxymoron, the sensible city, you're about to hear from the mayor of the most sensible city in America. So I'm very excited to introduce our panel. Once again, Mayor Francis Suarez. Francis, come on out, please. Francis Suarez. I think they're taking pictures. All right, Francis Suarez. Commissioner Danielle Cohen Higgins. Commissioner Cohen Higgins. Rebecca Gutierrez from Blink Charging. And Professor Carlo Ratti from MIT Sensible City Lab. So, thank you all. So I'm going to start this off by observing that Miami, and I mean Greater Miami, is constantly reinventing itself, but always with a sense that we were a big city even when we weren't. And I always found it ironic, but very telling, that in the late 19th century, when the city of Miami, or all of Dade County, when Miami was incorporated and the population was in like the four figures, the newspaper was called the Miami Metropolis. And so at some point in the late 20th century, I think we did graduate to major city status, to really being a metropolis, with major sports teams and a glamorous fashion and film industry and world-class arts, and a certain cachet among wealthy foreigners and Americans from the Northeast that found our town to be fun and exciting, if not particularly serious. So here we are at this new juncture in which we're developing new industries beyond the traditional industries here of tourism and luxury residential construction, and we're figuring out what's going on and how we can sustain that, and to how we can avoid the letdown and hangover that's followed so many of our previous booms. So we're going to talk about what we think is happening now, why it's good, why it might not be good in some cases, and what are the elements of making it stick so that we, and I mean all of us in this community, can enjoy long-term sustainable economic growth that actually makes our lives better. So I'm going to start with Mayor Suarez, Francis, who I think has been credited with encouraging unprecedented numbers of tech economy businesses from the West and the North and Europe and Latin America, as well as the finance industry giants from New York City and other finance hubs around the world to relocate to Miami recently. So what's going on, Francis? We tried to do this for the last 30 years. Why Miami and why now?
It's a confluence of macro factors that have conspired to benefit us in a given moment, starting with the SALT deduction going away and making places that were relatively more expensive even more expensive. In fact, they're 13% more expensive in both New York and California. Then you had COVID, which presented two disruptive events, one of which was the advent or the prominence of remote work, in conjunction with our COVID policy, which some would argue wasn't good, some would argue was great, but it was certainly more open than other cities. And so, people came here. And then I think that created a fourth phenomenon, which is what I call the collision effect of those people moving here and realizing that there was critical mass, which is the one thing we were missing. I call that the FlyMo effect. So it's a flywheel plus fear of missing out, FOMO combined, FlyMo. and then I think you had a mayor, that was presenting a counterintuitive message, right? Where much of America was saying F Elon Musk in California. In New York, you were pushing out Amazon HQ2 after winning the competition. The signaling effect of those two, among other events, was, hey, we don't want you here. And it's really hard to build a welcoming ecosystem when you don't feel wanted. And so I think the how can I help response to, hey, what if we move Silicon Valley to Miami, was a welcome mat, right? Was a red carpet that said, hey, we want you here. We want you to help build, help us scale, help us fulfill our dreams. We had been an intellectual talent exporter for decades. And I call this the family reunification plan, where our children who were educated in places like MIT, right, oftentimes did not come back to Miami because they couldn't fulfill their dreams and their hopes in our ecosystem. And that was unfortunate. And those were my friends and my family members in some cases. One of which passed recently that went to MIT, actually. And so, that's how I quantify and describe the phenomenon of what I call the Miami miracle.
I think that's a great summary. I'm going to jump to Danielle, and I do want to say that in my view, Miami-Dade County, the county government, has also been working closely with the city of Miami to encourage this growth. And for those of you who don't know, the city of Miami is a very significant part, but is not the whole county. The county has more than 30 other municipalities in it, and another 2.25 million people outside of the city of Miami. So it's also really important to consider. So Danielle, you got into government relatively recently. Oh, and by the way, I didn't really do a full biographical introduction on each of our panelists, and please fill in a little bit of the blanks and tell us a little bit about what your background is. I think everybody's probably pretty familiar with Francis by now, but everybody else, please do that. But Danielle, you've gotten into government fairly recently. Tell us why you did that and what you think of this current moment. Is it our 15 minutes of fame, or is it just the beginning of an unprecedented transformation from a fun place to be to the world's laboratory for innovation?
Thank you, Mitch. And why did I get into government? Honestly, because I wanted to be like this guy. I wanted to be Mayor Francis Suarez. No, honestly, I got into government because I was a mother, I was a lawyer, I was a member of my community, and I was watching things from a passive perspective. I was sitting back and watching decisions being made about my community that affected me, my family, my children. And I said, listen, I've been a trial lawyer for 15 years now. I consider myself an effective and an aggressive advocate on behalf of each of my individual clients. What if I took those skills and applied it to my entire community? And so because decisions were being made that affected me and my family, I said, listen, I think I can do this just as good, if not better. And so I threw my hat into the race and I ran for the county commission. So that's kind of how I got into government. And regarding whether or not this Miami miracle or this Miami moment or this Miami momentum, whatever you choose to call it, whether it's our 15 minutes of fame or whether it will be long lasting, It is not a 15 minutes of fame. It will be long lasting. You are all a part of the beginning of something very special. And I say with confidence that it's going to be long lasting because you're sitting in front of two leaders in this community that are committed to exactly that. And leadership matters. It's important. It makes a difference. And exactly like the examples that the mayor just described, where other communities, other counties, other municipalities were not welcoming and embracing of technologies, of progress, and of advancement, you saw the outcome. And you see the catalyst of what happens when leadership embraces the same. And so because you're in a community where the county commission, where municipal mayors are so involved and so committed to progress and advancement, this is not 15 minutes. This is the next 15 years plus.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. I'm very encouraged. Rebecca, your company, Blink Charging, seems to be everywhere, but Blink is one of those mobility tech companies that chose to base its operations here and your staff in Miami. So why does Miami, which is at a far corner of our continent, surrounded by what I would say is a far less ambitious and forward-thinking state, and far from the traditional hubs of innovation and traditional sources of capital, make sense to you as a business person?
Sure, thank you very much. So for those who maybe don't know or who somehow missed that absolutely giant black and green booth at the front of the show, Blink Charging is an EV infrastructure company, and we are headquartered here in Miami-Dade County on Miami Beach, right on Lincoln Road, and always have been. We were founded in 2009, and we continue to be committed to the community as well. So for us, it's important. We are in the EV space, but we're not in California, and that surprises a lot of people. But it has also given us a lot of opportunity. First and foremost, right, we get to look out our headquarter windows and see why we're doing this. We see beautiful Miami Beach. We know that the time is now to protect it, and we know that we're affecting that change through electrification of the transportation system. So it's very real to us. It's a very visible reminder. But also, there is talent in Miami, and there always has been talent. We have 53 people currently that reside in South Florida. We're hiring another 13 people for our South Florida headquarters. And we have the talent we need, and that's only increasing as well as Suarez and his policies are bringing in more of the top talent across the nation to Miami and Miami-Dade County. We're seeing that, and we're loving it, by the way. Thank you. So for Florida, it wasn't really an option, and it's a surprise to many. Everyone thinks EV and they think California. Well, guess what? The #2 state for EV registrations is Florida. So it's no surprise that we're here and we're making big inroads here. The state has been a big supporter of electric vehicles. In fact, we were just awarded a grant to electrify the corridors up and down the state as well. So we're here to stay, and we love it.
Wonderful. And I'm glad that you're here, and welcome, and thank you for coming. The Buddha said that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and I insisted that we have somebody from higher education on this panel, and that's Carlo Ratti from MIT. And so, Carlo, I welcome your perspective on this. You've lived, studied, taught in Italy, the United Kingdom, and now one of the world's leading US universities, and a recognized leader in innovation and technology. So please tell us about that and how you see Miami through that prism.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're all impressed and we're all fan of, what the mayor called the miracle here in Miami and how many people want to move here. And clearly, there's clear attractivity. It was mentioned about quality of life and the weather. However, I think we need to pay attention to the following. If you think about the University of Innovation Center, that's a lot of that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if people think they're in the best place to innovate, other people will go and everybody will go, and then you create a great innovation center. The same happens with the university. If everybody thinks that your university, whatever it is, in the top 10 globally, top 50 globally, then the best professors, the best students will want to go. Now, when you got those dynamics, it can be great, and you got big waves, but then you need some anchors to make sure they stay in the long term. And so here I want to say, what could be the possible risk? I mean, we've seen it in Europe. In Europe, the innovation, VC and innovation has been more like a recent story. a story that went from, they started in London, and then, you see Paris, Berlin, and Lisbon. And you've seen all these cities, and people like a few years ago moving from Berlin to Lisbon, better quality of life, better weather. But again, if you don't have an anchor, the risk is that, this talent will then find another cool place and migrate to another place. So somehow it seems to me that one of the key things is then how to create also a more embedded higher education ecosystem. I mean, that's what you were hinting at. Somehow there's great universities here in the state, but probably engineering, biotech, there could be more investment in that. New university being attracted. A nice story is what New York did with Cornell Tech, actually creating a new university to have a new technical university in the city. So that will be my kind of my 5 cents. Today is a magic moment, but again, the point is those self-fulfilling prophecies also can be moving around, as we've seen in Europe over the past few years. So how could this be anchored with using this, the very good moment of the city, in order to anchor this with investment in more higher education, innovation, infrastructure, locally grown?
All right, I'm going to come right back to you, but I want to recognize that one of the authors of this moment just walked into the room. Alberto Ibargüen has been a leading philanthropist in our community for, since he was with the Miami Herald, but the Knight Foundation has been responsible for more of the seed grants that made possible the growth of tech and innovation in Miami than I think any other organization, and I greatly appreciate him and wanted to recognize him. I know he's going to speak later. So for the next set of questions, I have a different question for each of you, but all of you are welcome to chime in. So first, Carlo, I'm going to go back to you and ask you to elaborate a little bit more on what you were saying, because I think that Boston really was probably the first tech center in America, which is not surprising given its many preeminent universities, including MIT and Harvard. Miami has a lot of excellent institutions of higher learning, but they're certainly a lot younger than MIT and Harvard, with less of a track record of producing innovators. So what needs to happen in Miami from an education standpoint for a burgeoning tech industry to really thrive and take off in a way that the Bay Area has?
Yeah, and building on what I was saying before, I think finding a way to do either what New York did with Cornell Tech, to bring in new universities to actually cover some of the research that might not be so, they might, some of those sectors that might need more development locally. I mean, that could be one direction. I think something else that's very needed today in higher education is how to rethink the model. Clearly, higher education today is too expensive. The model doesn't scale up. It can work in the US. It doesn't work. You cannot think about solving higher education globally with an Ivy League type of model. Again, it doesn't scale, too expensive. And so the other interesting thing would be, well, how can we think about new models? There's a lot of experiments, peer-to-peer schools like Colcarando in France, a lot of MOOCs combined with physical space. So maybe the other option would be, could Miami now is a great lab, become also a lab not only for innovation, but for the making of innovation, so for university, thinking about what's a campus for the next century. That's probably one of the most interesting open questions today.
So maybe we can get sort of an MIT Sensible Cities lab pop-up in Miami.
That would be great. We're very happy to do it. But we could also think about how this could become the higher ed 2.0 that, from here could then expand.
I love the idea. Thank you. So next question, Rebecca. At Emerge Americas a number of years ago, somebody mentioned that Miami had the most startups of any U.S. Population center and the fewest scale-ups per startup of any city. In the past, entrepreneurs were attracted to the Bay Area, Boston, LA, and New York because they needed to be near VCs and PEs and that were funding their projects. Is that still true today? Is the investment ecosystem here in Miami, and does the international ecosystem take us seriously as a business center, as seriously as the traditional hubs?
Sure. So I would say definitely we are taken seriously on not just a national scale, but globally as well. So Blink is in 18 countries. If we need to go talk to anyone, we can very easily. But I think overall, in general, the access is there. COVID changed a lot of things. People have very much dispelled a location-based thinking. So if you need private equity, if you need venture capital, you can get all those things as well. As a lot of the financial institutions of New York have also relocated, opened offices, and live here in South Florida as well. So we have access to that as well. Knight Foundation is another great example, as well as incubators and accelerators for entrepreneurs to help them scale and grow. So I absolutely would say resoundingly you can get what you need here.
I'm glad to hear that. Very encouraging. So, and again, anybody can weigh in on anyone else's questions. So Danielle, you've been an outspoken advocate of both inclusiveness and environmental sensitivity. We can come back to the environment in a moment, but on the issue of inclusivity, I have to be honest, I still see that most of the benefits of what's happening now are still going to a demographic that has traditionally enjoyed those benefits. How do we make sure that the prosperity that comes with this influx of wealth and energy benefits women, people of color, people with disabilities, and people who arrive here every day from other countries seeking freedom, security, and better lives that may not be currently available in their home countries?
Thanks for asking that question, Mitch. I think it's a really important one because as this tech ecosystem grows here in Miami-Dade County, what we don't want is we don't want our residents, the backbone, the taxpayers of Miami-Dade County to feel left out, right? We don't want them to feel not a part of this growth and feel inclusive. And the list that you just recited at the end of your question, women, people of color, people that are immigrants, all of those are me, right? And so as a leader in this county, I have to and I will look out for the interests of those in my community that look like, speak like, and have stories that are just like me, because that's representative of Miami-Dade County. We are a majority minority community where almost everyone, if you hear our stories, are from someplace else, are families of immigrants. And so how do our residents fit into this ecosystem and this equation? And it's on us. It becomes on us as government officials to make sure that when companies introduce themselves in Miami-Dade County, that when finance firms mobilize here and move here, we are asking your companies questions like, what are your values? What are your hiring practices? What are your goals? Are you looking to become members of our Miami-Dade community? And what are you going to do to contribute to the betterment of our community? That will help make sure that this tech ecosystem, as it grows, continues to have inclusivity as part of its value-driven goal. And I hope that's true for all of the companies here. It's certainly a priority of mine as a sitting government official, and I believe it's a priority of everyone here in Miami-Dade County.
Francis, on Monday at Emerge, you and Pitbull were talking about he used a Spanish expression like chupa la jugo or something. Something about we didn't want people to come and just drink the juice and leave.
That was Pitbull that said that.
Yes, I recall. I don't know if I quoted him accurately.
We're not talking about chupaing anything.
All right. Well, anyway, what you mentioned, though, and I thought it was worth mentioning to this audience, the several recent instances in which some of the new arrivals have already started giving back, and I thought it's worth having you repeat a few of those examples.
I actually appreciate it because as all the three panelists, my colleagues, were speaking, I was taking notes on the things that they were saying, and it was driving me towards that very place, right? And I think, so I'm a bit of a numbers guy. I like to quantify things. I'm into the analytics of things and sort of the data part of it. So I think there's been at least two massive watershed moments in this Miami movement that are significant, right? I think one of them was SoftBank through Marcelo Claude's Miami initiative, which pledged $100 million for companies that are born, that were born in Miami or moved to Miami. He pledged $100 million, and they have deployed $250 million. So that is significant. And then just recently, we had Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase in a conglomeration of organizations pledge $100 million for tech equity. Now, I don't know of any other city, and I could be wrong. This is sometimes the fact that I don't know doesn't mean it didn't happen, but I don't know any other city in the world or in the country that has dedicated $100 million to tech equity. I don't know of anybody. I could be wrong, but I don't know of anyone. So I think to the commissioner's point, and she's been such a great partner, and I'm so grateful for her because she's so bold and gets it and goes all in, you know, and it's it's all humility. There's no arrogance to it, right? And that's why we've done so many things together, and it's a pleasure to work with her. But I just don't know of any community that has taken more concrete steps. I'm a fundamentally positive person. I mean, it's hard, you know, I get that, you know, I'm not Pollyannish. I get that there are problems, and I understand we have to solve them, and I understand that things don't always go right. But I also like to focus on the things that we do well as opposed to constantly criticizing ourselves, which we have a tendency to do for whatever reason. And I think, again, when you look at it from a resource perspective, the Knight Foundation, which you pointed out, is a phenomenal example of an organization that's resourcing education, higher education, at a very, very high level and significant level. And have resourced my office in this tech movement, and they've done so many positive and amazing things because they care and because they do things that are tangible. It's not just about caring. We can all care, we get up and we all care, but there's a difference between caring and there's a difference between doing. And what's fundamentally different, I think, about our community is we don't just care, we actually do. You do, Alberto does, and his organization does, you know, this conglomeration of organizations do, SoftBank did, and we're going to continue to do.
All right, so now I'm going to come back to you with the really tough question, the first problem that we need to solve, I think. So obviously an influx of wealth from other cities and other countries can have a tremendous positive effect on our community, and I know it is. It can also have some unintended consequences, and one example I can think of that really stands out is home prices. And basically our property values, and it's great if you're going to sell a home and move somewhere where homes are cheaper, but our property values seem to have doubled or in some places tripled overnight. And the most desirable there's a ripple effect because in the most desirable neighborhoods, if the homes become $4 and $5 million, it ripples out into the other neighborhoods. And anecdotally, I've heard of people getting into 7-figure bidding wars over a teardown on a quarter acre as far south as 174th Street in District 8. Tech is creating a lot of good jobs, but even people who earn $250,000 a year, which is 4 times the median income in this community, are having trouble finding a family home in Miami-Dade County. And I fear that people are going to head back to Manhattan, where you may still find a few things for under $1,000 a square foot if we get too far out.
They're not going to head back to Manhattan.
But beyond having the income-restricted affordable housing and workforce housing that we have, and that we do a very good job with, and we built a great ecosystem for that, I'm wondering if we're going to wind up having a problem housing the people who are getting these upper middle class jobs and how we're going to deal with that. So and I think that's something for everybody to comment on. I'd be especially interested to hear if Carlo has any thoughts on what has seen happen in other communities.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And the risk you have is that then is actually going to stop some of the positive dynamics we were saying, and that can create a lot of other negatives. I think the mayor before mentioned data, and I think data can help us a little bit here. Can help us. We've been doing a bit of work using big data to better understand affordability, better understand segregation in cities, integration. So I don't think there's an easy recipe here. It's really a big problem with the market. Clearly, you can solve it in the long term, but in the short term, probably what we can do is use big data in the city in order to better understand, get an understanding of such dynamics, and then at least apply a little bit of, help stir them a little bit in the short term. Otherwise, I think there's no silver bullet here.
From the private sector, there's little we can do. We're looking for the talent. All we can really do is attract the talent with the salaries that commiserate with the jobs, and really bring to the table everything we can to entice them to come to Miami, maybe live in a little bit smaller place than they desire, but when they get here, then treat them with open arms and make sure they're compensated fairly.
Right, but if I left Manhattan because I didn't want to have my family of 4 in 1,000 square feet just staring out at other buildings, I don't want that to be the solution in Miami.
Definitely
right?
not, but I would ask the data expert down here in the end. Is that where we are? I don't think so.
I'm licking my chops waiting for my turn on this
All
one.
right.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
So I appreciate you acknowledging this as being a tough question, because it truly is a tough question. In Miami-Dade County, it has been declared a true crisis on affordability. Everyone is stirring on what do we do about this situation where everybody's home prices are skyrocketing so that entry points are literally impossible for young people starting out or anybody that doesn't make $1 million a year. So what do we do about it? Listen, we live in America. We live in a capitalistic society. We embrace that here in Miami-Dade County, but we have to balance that with the reality that our residents are facing. In my district, in District 8, and you specifically referenced it, I have a unique asset that I represent. I have what I consider to be, and most would agree with me, as the most valuable asset in Miami-Dade County, which is land, right? A lot of it is owned by the government. What are we going to do with that land? Are we going to offer it to innovative companies like yours that offer innovative housing solutions? We've been looking into a number of those, and we're researching that at the county commission regarding different housing products that don't fit the standard mold of expensive building products that take a long time, that require delivery from international areas. And so innovation may be one of the answers to this housing affordability crisis. But it is a very real issue. It's one that we're all focused on addressing. We can't turn our eye and look at it, but I do think that one component of the answer will be actually looking to innovation and doing things differently and looking to the government to pony up land that may be underutilized to offer it towards these affordable housing options.
So Francis, you've been waiting.
I am, and I got 13 minutes left here, so I want to see if I can condense this as quickly as possible. So I'm going to hit you with a flurry of statistics and information, so just hang tight. So the reason why people are not going to go back to Manhattan is because the median household price of a house in Manhattan or a property in Manhattan is close to $1 million. In Miami-Dade County, it's $500,000. In fact, it's $540,000 to be exact. Last month it was $536,000, so it's up $4,000 month to month. Year to year, it's up about $50,000, about 10%. And what people have to understand about a median house price is that's the median price at which people are buying and selling a house. There's very little housing stock, which means that despite a lot of the doomsday scenarios about lack of housing affordability, people are buying and selling housing at record prices. I mean, at record pace, and there is no stock. Now, the good news is, and what makes us different from New York or California, particularly San Francisco, is in the case of New York, they're built out. Right, like if you go to Park Avenue, I was in the first building built in Park Avenue in the last 50 years, okay, 50. In San Francisco, they have artificially suppressed their supply through their building code. We have right now, currently, in the pipeline, in the city of Miami, which, as Mitch correctly stated, is just a fraction of Miami-Dade County, right? We're about a fifth in terms of total population of Miami-Dade County, of the MSA of 2.8 million people. We have 47,000 units in the residential development pipeline right now. 47,000 units. That is a 25% increase in our housing stock that is going to come online in the next 24 to 36 months. Okay. Now, when you look at total capacity, so that's just short-term capacity. When you look at total capacity, we have the capacity to grow 10x. Okay? How do you come up with that number? Well, that's the delta between number of current residential dwelling units and number of potential residential dwelling units at the maximum zoning envelope, right? By the way, that doesn't mean you need any zoning changes. It's as of right. You walk into a government building, you pull a permit, you get to build. The delta between what's built and what can be built is 10x in Miami. 10x. So we have the ability to supply. We're spending in the city $100 million in affordable housing that we're leveraging at a $15 to $20 margin, which means that for every dollar we put in, we're getting $15 from the private sector or $20 depending on the project. So we're going to get about $2 billion worth of gross construction for $100 million. What the commissioner articulated is super important. They have the largest cache of land, which is underzoned, by the way. So now this is land that's underzoned. So when I was talking about the 10x capacity, that's at current zoning. And there's land that's underzoned, right? So you have, for example, in the city of Miami, in Overtown, a project called Comer Place. That's a garden-style project where if you just did mid-rise, right? If you rezoned it from garden-style, which is I think 1 or 2 stories, to mid-rise, 15 stories, the density differential is massive. And they own the land and we have the money. So we can do it, right? It's a matter of will and it's a matter of political will. We know the problem. We have the solutions. They're tried and true. And by the way, I'll give you another statistic. There is a holistic benefit to affordable housing. It's not just about allowing to live people in an affordable and for employees, but when you look at a place like Overtown, where we spent over $100 million on affordable housing, it's not an accident that last year we went down in homicides 23%. And this year we're down in homicides over 35%. That's not by accident. That's because we have provided a holistic solution to some of the urban problems that we have, and that's a massive difference from what's happening in New York, in Philadelphia, Chicago, LA, take your pick. And you see I got a little worked up on that one.
Okay. Carlo, did you want to comment on that? You raised your hand earlier.
Sure. Very briefly, what the commissioner was saying about, how can we innovate also? Not only innovation, not only the content of the city, but also innovating the container in the way of making city, in the way of thinking about affordability. And there's an interesting experiment. It was developed as part of the C40 Association, which is an association of the 100 biggest and largest cities globally. And that's something that's been called Reinventing Cities, like a global contest, where when you got land to alienate, traditional ways you sell it to whoever pays most, or somehow somebody gets it and then you develop it. It's been developed. And here the idea was to turn that upside down and actually start by getting ideas from the community, from a group of people, from architects and developers, you name it, and then using that as a starting point for developing that lot. I think it's the 3rd edition is running now, but it's a model. Has been a very successful model in cities, from New York to Milan to London and so on. And so I think it could be a very interesting way to innovate again. Not only think about innovation not only as a content of the city, what we are saying today, but also innovation in the city itself, in the container.
Can I just jump back in briefly? By the way, I love the Zegna shoes. You got it. I have a pair myself. I forgot to mention, and I apologize, I forgot to mention the base rate of inflation in rental prices, right? So we talk about rental price increases in Miami, which are shocking, right? They are shocking. There's no doubt about it. But if you look across urban America, I'm the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I'm president of all the mayors in the country. I talk to all of them every day. The base rate of inflation in housing across America and rental prices is massive. Based on everything I've read and based on all the conversations I've had, I would guesstimate that it's in the 25 to 35% range in increases in base rate of inflation for housing. We are experiencing hyper demand. So that number for us has a delta. So we're at 40 or 50% increases in rental, right? But I think unfortunately, part of the conversation, what doesn't get talked about is the base rate of inflation, right? Everyone focuses on, our rents are up 50%. Yeah, that's true, they are. But they're up 25 to 35% across the country, right? And our hyper growth and our hyper demand is pushing that delta, which I think we're gonna be able to supply our way out of. And through innovation and intelligent, collaborations, we're gonna be able to solve.
Excellent. So we really are running a little short on time, but I don't want to finish without touching on the environmental issues. So just starting with Rebecca, what do you feel is the responsibility of the private sector who's coming here to earn and to grow business, for ensuring that this community remains livable, affordable, and literally above water?
Well, that's definitely a very necessary goal. We're a clean tech company. So for us, it's just in our DNA. It's what we do. But we have to keep collaborating. It's not just environmental issues that, we're tackling. You just touched on the housing issues. Also, we're at CoMotion based on transportation and mobility. We have mobility issues to tackle. And that's really the private sector working with the public sector and then working with entrepreneurs and innovators and the educational system to find these solutions. Because we don't know what the future of tomorrow is going to look like. Honestly, the people in this very room are the ones who are going to help define what that looks like. And that's why we're here, right? Having these conversations, starting these dialogues, and gathering people saying, what do you think we can do, and how do we start solving these very difficult problems?
Excellent. This is the lightning round. Carlo, can we innovate our way out of environmental catastrophe here?
Yeah. The question is not can we, is, we must innovate our way through this. And I think before thinking about adaptation, I think let's focus on mitigation. And certainly cities have a lot of potential just by using today's technologies to become less carbon intensive. And I think, we can discuss it. It's not, don't have time now to look at that in detail, but certainly a lot of technologies are there. It's a matter of implementing that in the fabric of the city.
Start
Excellent.
by driving electric.
Of course. Francis, the New York Times reported earlier in the week that a lot of the green tech companies in Europe were complaining that VC money was going into, a lot of it was going into crypto and not enough into sustainable development of green tech. What are we doing to encourage all of the investment in Miami to make sure that some of it goes toward things that will make our lives better?
Capital is always going to go where capital feels it's going to get its best return. So that's, I think we have to start and continue to talk about the issue of our ecosystem, our environment, in the right way. And so for me, what we say in our office is the environment is the economy. There's been this perception that the environment is antithetical to the economy, or you have to pick the economy or the environment. You're on one side or the other. And for us, our environment is intertwined with our economy, and I totally agree with Carlo. We must and we will innovate through this problem, but I would add one small thing to what he said. He talked about adaptation and mitigation, and I've come up with a new term, which is reversal, right? And it's a sort of a variation of how he defined mitigation, right? Which is what are the technologies that we're going to implement that are going to decarbonize our atmosphere, or are going to recreate homeostasis in our environment. And I think in our lifetime we will see them, and they will be in action, and then there'll be other issues that we have to solve. But I recently had a Cafecito Tech Talk with a Tesla Prize winner who got a $100,000 prize, a young lady, actually two young ladies, incredible tech idea, which was to for container ships to have a solution that changes slightly the top layer of pH of our water bodies, of our oceans. And if you look at the sort of where all container ships go, it's a very comprehensive routing system, right? It's kind of like when you see the airplanes in the air. And by doing that, most people don't know that the largest capture of carbon is actually our oceans. And so by slightly changing the pH, we can actually, without harming our oceans, we could actually capture more carbon. So I'm just using that as an example of innovative technologies that could solve some of these problems quickly.
And then, Danielle, how do you see this Miami momentum affecting the far south part of our county?
I think it's going to affect South Dade, the area that I represent, because again, with the amount of people that are populating and moving to Miami, they all can't congest in the same area. Eventually they will have to spread out, and eventually they will head south to my district. We already see it happening. You mentioned it. House prices in our area that once were affordable are now completely out of reach. And so Miami is a very large county. We're 3 million people. We have a huge budget, and we're very large from a square mile perspective. And so we will see growth in population, which has already begun in South Dade, because all of the employees and all of the people people that are moving here, that are working for all of these innovative companies, need a place to live. And if the urban core, they're completely priced out there, they're going to look outwards into smaller and municipal areas, which are the areas that I represent in South Dade.
All right, last minute, last question, one sentence each. We're reinventing Miami today. What do you want to see? Carlo.
I would say more higher education related to all the innovation ecosystem in order to root it and thinking about, as we were saying, something like a new model for higher education that could start here.
So not only the new Silicon Valley, but the new Boston. All right, Rebecca, what would you like to see in the reinvented Miami?
Yeah, I would like to call it the maturing Miami. I'm not sure we're 100% reinventing, but I saw some cringes, so I'm going to stop that line of thinking. Just continued collaboration with the public-private sector and really having these deep conversations.
Danielle.
Yeah, so I think I'd love to see Miami become the model city. And by that, I mean I want us to be pioneers of progress. I don't want us to just be known as a tech hub or as a tech innovation community. I want us to be known as a tech hub and a tech innovation community that is inclusive, that is diverse, that also has value-driven propositions built in. That will yield to Miami being a model city for not only tech, but for inclusivity, housing, and all these other issues that affect all of our residents. If we're able to accomplish that and balance those interests successfully, we will absolutely be the model city.
Francis, you're finishing up an internationally recognized tenure as mayor of one of the world's most visible cities. Will we live up to our reputation and create a substantive, lasting, thriving, and inclusive community here?
I'm betting my career on it. Yeah, by the way, I'm just getting warmed up. I just started my second term, so that's what my dad would say. I'm just getting warmed up. I think we all fundamentally, despite our differences, believe in the same things. Everybody wants the same thing, and I've traveled the world, and everyone that I've met in the world, no matter what language they speak, no matter what culture they're from, all want fundamentally the same three things. They want prosperity for themselves and their family. They want to live in peace and tranquility, and they want their tomorrows to be better than their yesterdays. And I think that is the hack. We have to continue to hack our way to creating that world. That's the challenge, right? Because that is the unifying message that will unite us in this city, in this county, in this state, in this country, and in this world. And it's not easy. If it was easy, we would have done it, right? But I think what gets us up in the morning, all of us, all four of us, I can tell, is that challenge, right? The excitement of knowing that it's possible, it's in our grasp, it's within our reach to be able to solve these generational and historic problems.
And I know that you and Danielle and Daniela will accomplish it and will create the model for the rest of the world. I want to thank this panel. I want to thank the people that put on CoMotion because they do all the hard work and we just get to stand up here and bask in their glory. So thank you very much, and I really enjoyed this.